Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a question that feels more urgent than ever. In a world just overflowing with information and so-called experts, why should we trust science? We'll be digging into the answer through Naomi Oreskes' really incredible book.
We live in an age where there's conflicting information on just about everything, right? Experts seem to disagree all the time. It really makes you stop and wonder, who can you actually trust?
Just think about something like public health. On one hand, we hear that vaccines are one of the greatest medical achievements in history. But then on the other, we see these claims that just won't go away, linking them to all sorts of harm. It's so easy to feel completely lost in that sea of contradictory information. And it's not just about our health, it's about the future of the entire planet. Is climate change a crisis that we created, or is it just a natural cycle we can't do anything about? The conflicting messages can feel totally paralyzing, leaving us just wondering who or what are we supposed to believe? For centuries, the answer to this question seemed pretty simple. We trust science because it has a special method, like a secret recipe for finding the truth. The dream was this: create one strict, logical procedure that could untangle any problem. The hope was that any scientist, anywhere in the world, could just follow the method and arrive at pure, objective truth, totally free from all that messy human bias. But here's the thing. When you actually look at history, this perfect method has never been one single fixed thing. At first, the idea was that you had to verify your ideas with observation. Then, Karl Popper came along and just flipped that completely on its head, arguing that real science tries to falsify theories to prove them wrong. And then later, Thomas Kuhn showed that science often works inside these little bubbles or paradigms that can get totally blown up and replaced in scientific revolutions. The ground under our feet is always shifting.
And, to make it even more complicated, philosophers like Pierre Duhem pointed out that you can't ever test just one single idea at a time. Every experiment is also a test of your equipment, your math, all of your background assumptions, the whole shebang. So if an experiment fails, you don't really know which part was wrong. Turns out there's no such thing as a single silver bullet experiment that definitively proves or disproves a big idea.
So if there's no magic method, no foolproof recipe for truth, what's left? Are we just lost? Well, according to Naomi Oreskes, the answer isn't in a method. The answer is in the people. The answer really started coming into focus when thinkers changed their perspective. Instead of studying some abstract method, they started studying actual scientists. A huge figure here was the microbiologist Ludwig Fleck, who said we need to stop obsessing over lone geniuses and start looking at what he called thought collective. Now, Fleck's insight here was pretty radical. He said that knowledge isn't produced by individuals working alone. No, it's the achievement of a community. Scientists work together, they challenge each other, they build on each other's work, all within a shared way of thinking. Okay, but wait a minute. This creates a huge paradox, right? If science is just what a group of people agrees on, doesn't that make it more subjective, not less? Isn't that just a fancy version of peer pressure or even groupthink? And this is where Oreskes' argument gets really, really interesting. She shows that this social process, when it's working the way it should, isn't the enemy of objectivity. It's the very thing that creates it. The big breakthrough here actually came from a group of thinkers you might not expect, feminist philosophers of science. They basically flipped the whole problem around. They said, hey, what if objectivity isn't something an individual scientist has? What if it's something a community builds together? The philosopher Helen Longino called this process transformative interrogation. And really, the best way to picture it is like a super rigorous courtroom. A new claim is presented, and then it gets cross-examined from every possible angle by a whole jury of skeptical peers. This is how all those individual biases and hidden assumptions get dragged out into the light and challenged. And that whole process leads to something the philosopher Sandra Harding calls strong objectivity. The idea here is that knowledge actually becomes more objective, more reliable, when the community that's asking the questions is more diverse. And here's why that diversity is so absolutely critical. A lone genius, or even a big group where everyone thinks the same way, well, they have what's called weak objectivity. They all share the same blind spots. But a community with lots of different backgrounds and perspectives is way more likely to spot each other's errors and question those unspoken assumptions.
So here it is, the key takeaway. Diversity in science isn't just some nice-to-have social goal. It is a core requirement for producing the most robust, reliable knowledge we possibly can. It's a source of epistemic strength. In other words, it just makes our knowledge stronger.
And all of this brings us right back to our original question. But now, finally, we have a much more powerful and, frankly, a much more realistic answer. This framework also gives us a really powerful tool to answer a common skeptical question, like this one. Why should we see science as any more authoritative than an analysis from, say, the petroleum industry?
Well, the difference really comes down to process and goals. We should be skeptical of claims from a group with a very clear financial conflict of interest. Their primary goal isn't necessarily truth. It's protecting a business model. The scientific community, on the other hand, has a different goal: understanding, and a process, that critical interrogation, that's specifically designed to get closer to the truth. The results from those two approaches are fundamentally different.
So our trust shouldn't be placed in any one study, or any single scientist, or some mythical method. It should be placed in the hard-won, critical consensus that emerges from a diverse, self-critical expert community that has collectively vetted all of the evidence. This isn't about blind faith in people wearing white lab coats, not at all. It's about having an informed trust in a rigorous, collective, and constantly self-correcting process. And that leaves us with a final question to take with us. The next time you see a bold scientific headline, remember to ask not just what is being claimed, but how the scientific community arrived at that conclusion. Are you looking at a finished product, or are you looking at the rigorous process that built it? Because that's where true trust really lies.